I was still in uniform when my phone buzzed. It was a Thursday night at Fort Carson. I'd just wrapped up a supply chain review that ran longer than it should have. Nothing dramatic, just paperwork numbers, signatures, the usual. In logistics, if things are exciting, that means someone messed up. I was walking across the parking lot when I saw my sister's name on my screen, Ashley. We hadn't talked much that week. That wasn't unusual. With her silence usually meant she was busy planning something expensive. I opened the message. Don't contact us again. That was it. No explanation. No build-up. No typo. No emotion. Just a clean sentence like she'd drafted it twice before hitting send. Under it, another message followed. We're done. Move on. I stood there for a few seconds, keys in one hand, phone in the other, watching soldiers move past me toward their cars. Nobody else's life had changed in that moment. Mine hadn't either. Not really. I didn't call her. I didn't send a paragraph. I didn't defend myself. I typed one word. Okay. Then I put my phone in my pocket and drove home. The thing about being in the Army for over a decade is you learn how to separate emotion from action. If someone tells you they don't need you in an operation, you step back. You document it. You remove yourself from the chain. You don't argue in the middle of the field. You adjust. By the time I got to my apartment, I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was clear. Ashley had always been the dramatic one. Big reactions. Big plans. Big announcements on social media with filtered photos and captions about new seasons. I was the quiet one. The one who checked the numbers. The one who asked if the loan terms made sense. The one who noticed when something didn't add up. Apparently that made me the problem. Earlier that week we had argued at dinner. My parents' house. Same dining room table we'd sat at for 20 years. Ashley was talking about the townhouse she and her husband were finalizing. Waterfront view. Better school district. Leveling up, as she called it. I asked one question. How are you structuring the funding? That was it. She rolled her eyes like I'd insulted her. Said I always did this. Said I couldn't just be happy for her. Said I acted like I was smarter than everyone else because I wore a uniform and used words like verification. The truth was simpler. I knew the numbers. I'd reviewed them before. Not officially. Just because she'd sent them to me and asked, "Does this look right?" That's how it always started. Does this look right? It rarely did. By the time dessert came out, I was apparently controlling. By the time I got in my car that night, I was unsupportive. And by Thursday evening, I was cut off. Don't contact us again. That sentence told me more than she meant it to. Because here's what people misunderstand about family drama. It's never about one sentence. It's about patterns. For years, I'd been the unofficial safety net. Not the decision maker, not the owner, just the person everyone looped in when things felt complicated. My parents' refinance paperwork. Ashley's first business, LLC filing. The tax notice that turned out to be a missed estimated payment. The contractor dispute when someone forgot to read the clause about material delays. Every time something got messy, my phone lit up. I never complained. I just fixed it. That night, standing in my kitchen, I opened my laptop out of habit. Not because I planned to respond, because I needed to confirm something. Ashley and her husband were in the middle of 3 major moves at once. 1, the townhouse purchase. 2, preparing my parents' house for listing so they could downsize. 3, placing my grandmother in a private assisted living community that required proof of financial stability. None of those were small decisions. And while I wasn't signing anything, my name had been referenced more than once in conversations with brokers and coordinators. My sister's in the Army. She handles compliance. She looked over it. People relax when they hear that. Military, logistics, compliance. It sounds stable. I scrolled through old emails, threads where I'd clarified language for the title company, notes where I'd explained how the funding chain would likely be viewed by a lender. A forwarded draft from Ashley with, "Can you double-check this before we send it?" I had. Every time. But Ashley's text was clear. Don't contact us again. In the Army, when you're removed from an operation, you don't hover nearby just in case someone changes their mind. You step out of the system. Cleanly. I closed my laptop and set it on the counter. No dramatic music. No speech to the ceiling. Just a decision. If I wasn't part of the family's decisions anymore, I wouldn't be part of the infrastructure behind them either. That didn't mean sabotage. It didn't mean revenge. It meant alignment. Their words matched my actions. The next morning, I woke up at 500 like usual. PT, shower, uniform pressed, coffee strong. By 700, I was at my desk on base reviewing a transportation contract modification. Real numbers. Real accountability. If something goes wrong in my world, it's not awkward. It's investigated. Around 7:43, I opened my personal email. There were 3 threads sitting there related to Ashley's townhouse deal. One from the title coordinator asking for clarification on a funding timeline. One from the broker about inspection contingencies. One forwarded message from Ashley marked urgent. I read them carefully. Then I started typing. Short, direct, professional. Effective immediately. I am withdrawing from any informal review or verification related to the Brooks family real estate transactions. Please remove my name from any communications suggesting oversight or compliance input. I sent a version of that message to each party that had looped me in. No accusations, no drama, just clarity. Then I logged into the shared document portal Ashley had once given me access to and removed myself. Access revoked. I took a sip of coffee. On base, the morning moved on like nothing had shifted. Soldiers walked past my office. A supply convoy schedule updated on the shared board. Someone down the hall complained about printer toner. At 9:12, my phone buzzed. Ashley. I let it ring. At 9:14, it rang again. At 09:16, a third time. I flipped the phone face down and went back to work. By lunchtime, I had 6 missed calls. None of them included, "We're sorry." None of them included, "Let's talk." Just repeat dialing. I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt aligned. They wanted to move forward without me. For the first time in years, I was making sure they could. I kept my phone face down for the rest of the afternoon. The calls stopped for about 20 minutes, then started again. Same name, same number, different urgency each time. I didn't need to hear the voicemail to know the tone had shifted. But none of that felt dramatic to me. It felt familiar. I've spent most of my life being the person people call when something isn't working. Not the favorite. Not the center of attention. The fixer. Ashley was always the loud one. Growing up, she had big plans before she had a driver's license. She redecorated her rooms every 6 months. She had vision boards before Pinterest was a thing. When she said she wanted something, my parents leaned in. When I said something needed a second look, they leaned away. She got applause. I got responsibility. That wasn't bitterness. It was just how it was. When Ashley forgot to submit a scholarship form senior year, I stayed up helping her rewrite the essay. When she overextended her first credit card in college, I helped her set up a repayment schedule. When she launched her consulting brand at 24 and didn't understand state registration requirements, I walked her through it step by step. I never asked to be looped in. I was invited. Usually after something had already gone sideways. It became a pattern. Can you take a look at this? Does this make sense? You're good with paperwork. That last one always made me smile. I'm not good with paperwork. I'm good with consequences. In the Army, if you ignore a detail, someone feels it. Supplies don't show up. Equipment isn't ready. Missions get delayed. That mindset doesn't turn off when you drive home. So when Ashley and her husband started talking about the townhouse earlier this year, I didn't question their ambition. I questioned the timing. Interest rates were up. Their income wasn't stable. Her husband had just left a contract job that didn't renew. Ashley framed it as a pivot. I framed it as a variable. She sent me the preliminary numbers late one night. Quick glance, she wrote. The funding structure depended on 3 moving parts aligning perfectly. The sale of my parents' house, the assumption that renovation costs would stay within estimate, and a short-term liquidity bridge that only worked if nobody blinked. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't fraudulent. It was fragile. I told her that. She didn't like that word. You always think something's going to go wrong, she said over the phone. I think something needs a backup plan, I replied. That difference sounds small. It isn't. Fragile systems look fine until pressure hits them. Then they crack at the seams. Ashley hated feeling like I was auditing her life. In her head, I was the older sister who couldn't just celebrate success without pulling out a calculator. In my head, I was trying to prevent her from celebrating something that might not hold. Our parents didn't see the tension, Or maybe they chose not to. They liked the idea of the townhouse, liked the story of moving up, liked the idea of placing Grandma in a high-end assisted living community with a polished brochure and a waiting list. It sounded good when Ashley described it. It sounded complicated when I read the documents. That dinner argument wasn't about one deal. It was about years of friction. She accused me of acting superior because of the Army. Because I spoke in terms like verification and contingency. Because I didn't clap fast enough when she announced something new. There's a difference between confidence and confirmation. Ashley lived on confidence. I operated on confirmation. When she sent that text telling me not to contact them again, part of me wondered if she expected me to chase her, to apologize for being cautious, to smooth it over the way I always had. I didn't. That was the only change. At 3:47 p.m., another call came through. Then a text. "Why did you email the title company?" So that was it. She'd seen the withdrawal. I didn't respond. A minute later, "Are you serious right now?" Followed by, "You're blowing this up over nothing." Nothing. The townhouse depended on funding that hadn't been re-verified. The lender expected clarity. The title coordinator had already asked for timeline confirmation. My name had been casually mentioned as the person who had looked it over. Now that name was gone. If that created friction, it wasn't because I broke anything. It was because the system had relied on me being there. At 4:12 p.m., my dad called. I let it ring once before sending it to voicemail. His message was controlled. Too controlled. "There seems to be some confusion with the transaction paperwork. Give me a call when you can." Confusion is a polite word for instability. I stared at my phone for a long moment before sliding it into my drawer. This wasn't about punishing anyone. I didn't wake up thinking, how can I ruin their plans? I woke up thinking, if I'm not part of this, I need to be fully not part of it. That's how you protect yourself in the military. Clear lines. Clear documentation. Clear accountability. Ashley's mistake wasn't ambition. It was assuming I would always be quietly reinforcing her decisions behind the scenes. For years, I'd absorbed the stress so she could absorb the spotlight. She didn't know what it looked like when I stepped back. Neither did my parents. By the time I left base that evening, the call count had climbed into double digits again. I didn't check the exact number. I didn't need to. I drove home with the windows cracked Colorado air cooling down as the sun dropped behind the mountains. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I wasn't thinking about karma. I was thinking about alignment. If someone tells you they don't need you, the cleanest response is to believe them. And for the first time in our lives, I was. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex that night, my phone lit up again before I even turned off the engine. Another call from Ashley. I watched it ring until it stopped. Then a text. "The lender is asking questions. What did you tell them?" I hadn't told them anything beyond the truth. I was no longer involved. That was enough. Inside my apartment, I set my keys down, changed out of my uniform, and opened my laptop again. Not to fix anything, just to understand exactly how exposed the structure was now that my name wasn't attached to it. The townhouse wasn't just a simple purchase. It was a sequence. Step 1, sell my parents' house. Step 2, use projected equity plus a bridge strategy to support Ashley's down payment. Step 3, finalize financing based on that projected liquidity. Step 4, move Grandma into Silver Ridge Estates, the assisted living facility Ashley had toured twice and posted about online. It looked clean on paper. It depended on timing, and timing depends on stability. The house my parents were planning to sell wasn't market ready. It needed roof work and plumbing repairs. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to delay a quick listing. The renovation contractor had already requested confirmation of deposit funds before scheduling labor. Ashley had told them not to worry. My sister looked at everything. She liked saying that. It gave people confidence. Military officer, logistics background, compliance experience. It sounded official even when it wasn't. I had never authorized that description. I had just never corrected it either. That was on me. Silver Ridge Estates required documentation showing long-term financial sustainability. Not just current income, not just projected home equity. They wanted proof that the resident could maintain placement for years. Ashley framed it as a temporary formality, a standard checklist. In reality, it was a risk assessment. When my grandmother's name went on that application, it wasn't about aesthetics. It was about numbers. Ashley believed the sale of my parents' house would clear quickly. The market was hot. Her word. The bridge plan would close the gap between the old house and the new townhouse. Everything would line up. That's what she believed. What she didn't understand was that lenders and title companies don't operate on belief. They operate on documentation. The moment I withdrew from informal oversight, something subtle changed. The casual references to my sister reviewed it no longer carried weight. If a coordinator wanted confirmation, they had to request it directly from the borrower. And Ashley didn't like direct requests. At 8:17 p.m., my dad called again. This time I answered. His voice was tight. "What did you send to the title company?" "A withdrawal," I said. "Why would you do that?" "Because Ashley told me not to be involved." That's not what she meant. I leaned back in my chair. What did she mean? A pause. She was frustrated. So was I. Another pause longer this time. "They're asking for updated verification on the funding structure," he said. "The coordinator said your name came up in earlier threads." "It won't anymore." Silence. "You know this delays things." "I know it clarifies things." He exhaled slowly. My dad doesn't yell. He negotiates, even when he's cornered. "Can't you just smooth it out?" There it was. The expectation. Not that I was right or wrong, that I would stabilize it. "I'm not part of it," I replied. "You've always been part of it." That was before. He didn't push further. He just ended the call with a quiet, "We'll talk tomorrow." I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling for a few seconds. For years, I'd acted as a pressure valve. If something built up, I released it before it exploded. Now the pressure had nowhere to go. The next morning, the emails started. First from the broker. "Can you confirm whether you are still advising on this transaction? No emotion, just business." I responded with a single line. "I am not." Then the title coordinator. "We are updating our records. Please confirm your role." I have no role. Then surprisingly from Silver Ridge Estates. "Ms. Brooks. For clarity, are you involved in the financial verification process for the Brooks family placement?" That one made me sit up straighter. My grandmother had no idea what was happening. She thought she was moving somewhere with better gardens and more bingo nights. She trusted Ashley completely. I typed carefully. "I am not involved in any financial or placement decisions for the Brooks family." I attached nothing else. No explanation. No justification. Within minutes, my phone buzzed again. "Ashley, you just torpedoed Grandma's application." "No," I typed back. I clarified my involvement. "You knew what that would do. I knew what it would show." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. "You're being petty." Petty would have been interfering. Calling the lender. Warning the facility. I did none of that. I removed myself. By mid-afternoon, the pattern was clear. Every party that had assumed I was quietly reinforcing the structure was now recalibrating, not canceling. Recalibrating. That's how collapse begins. Not with fire, with hesitation. At 3:02 p.m., a new number called. I let it ring twice before answering. "This is Marcus Hale with Evergreen Property Group, the broker." "I understand there's been a shift in advisory roles," he said carefully. "We're trying to determine how to proceed with the current timeline." "You proceed with the borrowers," I replied, "and there's no additional oversight from your end." "None." He paused. "Understood." When the call ended, I checked my missed calls. 21, not 58, not yet. But the tone had changed. The townhouse wasn't canceled. The house wasn't off the market. Grandma wasn't displaced. Everything was still technically moving forward, just without the quiet layer that had been holding it steady. And systems built on assumptions don't always show cracks immediately. Sometimes they wait until the weight shifts. I replayed that dinner in my head while brushing my teeth the next morning. Not because I regretted anything I said, because I wanted to make sure I hadn't missed something. It started like every other Sunday dinner at my parents' house. My mom overcooked the chicken. My dad asked about my schedule on base. Ashley arrived 20 minutes late with a bottle of wine she didn't open. She walked in already energized. "We got it," she announced before she even sat down. The townhouse. They accepted the offer. My mom clapped. My dad smiled like he'd just closed the deal himself. Her husband Ryan leaned back in his chair and nodded like this had all gone exactly according to plan. I congratulated her. I meant it. Then she started explaining the numbers, bridge structure, equity timing. A temporary overlap that would only last a few weeks once my parents' house sold. That's when I asked about the contingency buffer. Not aggressively, not sarcastically. Just a question. What's the backup if the house takes longer than expected? Ryan shifted in his seat. It won't, he said quickly. Markets shift, I replied. Ashley's smile tightened. You always do this. Do what? Act like we don't know what we're doing. I didn't say that. You don't have to. It's the tone. Tone. I had asked about numbers. She heard judgment. My dad tried to smooth it over. Your sister just likes details. That's not liking details, Ashley snapped. That's assuming we can't handle our own lives. The room got quiet in that uncomfortable way where everyone pretends it's not happening. I could have backed down, I had before, but this time I didn't. It's not about handling your life, I said. It's about making sure you're not exposed if one piece falls through. There you go again, she said. Exposed. Falls through. You talk like we're about to commit a crime. I talk like someone who reads contracts for a living. She laughed, not amused, sharp. You're not the only one who understands paperwork, Natalie. I didn't respond to that. There's no point arguing over credentials at a dinner table. Then she said something that shifted the whole tone. Not everything needs your oversight. That word, oversight, like I'd appointed myself. I never asked to oversee anything, I replied. You send it to me, because you make us feel like we have to. That one landed differently. My mom jumped in. She's just excited. Let's not turn this into something. But it was already something. Ashley leaned forward. You know what? Maybe we don't need you involved at all. The table went still. That's your call, I said. She held my gaze for a few seconds, waiting for me to soften it. I didn't. Dinner ended early. No dessert, no casual lingering. When I walked out to my car that night, I knew the argument wasn't finished. With Ashley, nothing ever ended at the table. It moved to text. And it did. The first message came around 9:14 p.m. You embarrassed me tonight. I didn't respond. Then another. You think because you're in the army you get to audit everyone. That one almost made me laugh. Nobody audits for fun. Then the final one. Don't contact us again. Followed by, we're done. Move on. I stared at that screen for a long moment. The thing about ultimatums is they're usually bluff. They're meant to trigger a chase, an apology, a concession. Ashley had sent dramatic messages before. They usually ended with, let's just forget it. This one didn't. It felt intentional. I thought about typing something long, something reasonable, something that would de-escalate. Instead, I typed, okay. Not sarcastic, not cold, just acceptance. That was the part she didn't expect. The next morning when I withdrew from the transaction threads, I wasn't reacting emotionally. I was aligning with what she'd asked for. No involvement, no oversight, no contact. When I got back to my apartment after work that evening, I found another text waiting. You had no right to email them without talking to us. Without talking to us. She'd told me not to contact them. I set my phone on this counter and poured a glass of water. For years, Ashley had been comfortable with my involvement as long as it stayed invisible. As long as I didn't question timing. As long as I didn't disrupt momentum. She liked momentum. She didn't like friction. I thought about something she'd said during dinner. Not everything needs your oversight. She was right. Nothing needs oversight until something breaks. At 7:22 p.m., my mom called. Her voice was softer than Ashley's, but the message was the same. Your sister is upset. She told me not to contact you. She didn't mean it like that. What did she mean? A pause. She meant she was hurt. So am I. That hung there. You could have just talked to her, my mom said. She told me not to. Silence again. You know this complicates things. Yes. My mom lowered her voice slightly. The title coordinator said your name came up again. They're confused. They shouldn't be. You're really not going to fix this. Fix. That word had followed me my entire life. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I asked a question. Did Ashley tell them I was still reviewing documents? Another pause. She might have mentioned you. Recently, I don't know. That was the moment something clicked. This wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. If my name was still being used to stabilize conversations I had stepped away from that wasn't emotional. That was structural. I'm not involved, I said. That needs to be clear. My mom sighed. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Or maybe I was making it honest. After we hung up, I checked my phone again. 32 missed calls since Thursday. Not 58, but climbing. Ashley sent one more message before the night ended. You're about to regret this. I set the phone down without replying. Regret usually comes from impulsive decisions. This wasn't impulsive. This was alignment. I woke up before my alarm and reached for my phone without thinking. 43 missed calls. The last one had come in at 1:12 a.m. No voicemail from Ashley. 3 from my dad. 1 from a number I didn't recognize. That one mattered more than the rest. I set the phone down and went through my normal routine. PT at 0600. Cold air. Cadence in the background. Soldiers complaining about weekend duty. The world hadn't shifted. My life hadn't imploded. The army doesn't pause because your family is arguing about real estate. By the time I was showered and in uniform, my phone buzzed again. Ashley. I let it ring. Then a text. Call me now. All caps. Urgency had officially replaced anger. At 7:41, I sat at my desk and opened my personal email. There were 2 new threads. One from the title coordinator. Given recent clarification, we need updated verification directly from the borrowers. Professional, neutral, careful. The second was from the lender's assistant. We are pausing further processing pending confirmation of funding structure. Pausing. That's the polite version of we're not comfortable. I didn't smile. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt something closer to inevitability. At 7:56, my dad called again. This time I answered. Why are they saying you're not involved? He asked without greeting. Because I'm not. You know what this does? It clarifies responsibility. They're asking Ashley to resubmit documentation. She can. That's not the point. It was exactly the point. My dad lowered his voice. They're nervous. About what? About the timing. The bridge. The overlap. The same things I'd mentioned at dinner. They want confirmation you've reviewed it. I haven't. You did before. Not anymore. Silence. You're being rigid. I almost laughed at that. In the army, rigid keeps people alive. I'm being accurate. He exhaled slowly. Can't you just send a quick note saying everything's fine? Everything wasn't fine. It was fragile. And the difference between fine and fragile matters when numbers are involved. I won't attach my name to something I'm not overseeing, I said. You're making this worse. No, I'm stepping out. He didn't argue further. He just ended the call. At 8:23, my phone lit up again. The unknown number from last night. I answered. This is Daniel Brooks, the man asked. No. This is Captain Natalie Brooks. A brief pause. Apologies. This is Graham Pike. I represent your parents regarding the property transaction. There it was. A lawyer. We're trying to understand the nature of your recent withdrawal, he continued. It's simple, I replied. I'm no longer involved. There appears to be some confusion among the third parties. That's because my name was mentioned after I stepped away. Another pause. So you are not verifying any aspect of the funding structure? I am not. And you did not authorize any representation suggesting otherwise? I did not. He cleared his throat. This places your parents in a complicated position. Only if they assumed I was still part of it. Silence on the other end. Then carefully, they did. That confirmation didn't feel good. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt dangerous. Because being casually referenced is one thing. Being relied upon without consent is another. I sent written notice yesterday morning, I said. It was time-stamped. Yes, we've seen it. Then there shouldn't be confusion. There is, he replied. Because the transaction was structured with your informal oversight in mind. Informal oversight. That phrase again. I never agreed to formalize that role. I understand, he said. But lenders operate on perceived stability. Perceived stability. That's what I'd been providing, without even realizing it. Then they need to adjust their perception, I replied. Another pause. May I ask, he said, why you withdrew so abruptly? I was told not to contact my family again. The silence this time was longer. That appears to have been a heated exchange. It was clear. I see. He shifted tone slightly. There is also the matter of the assisted living application. What about it? Silver Ridge has requested updated financial assurances in light of the transaction delay. Transaction delay. Not collapse, not cancellation. Delay. But delays in a chain like this ripple outward. That's between them and my parents, I said. Understood. He hesitated before adding, is there any scenario in which you would reconsider your involvement? There it was, the pivot point. For years, that question never had to be asked. I always reconsidered. I always stepped back in. This time the answer came easily. No, he didn't argue. Lawyers rarely do when the record is clear. Very well, he said. I appreciate your directness. When the call ended, I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling tiles in my office. This wasn't family tension anymore. It was documentation. At 10:37, Ashley finally left a voicemail instead of just calling. Her voice was tight. You're going to ruin this for all of us. I listened to it once, then saved it. Not because I planned to use it, because clarity matters. By noon, the count had reached 51 missed calls. 17 from Ashley, 13 from my dad, 8 from my mom. The rest from numbers tied to brokers and legal offices. 51. 2 days ago, I was unnecessary. Now they couldn't seem to function without me. At 2:14 p.m., my phone buzzed again. 52, then 53, then 54. I turned it face down and focused on the contract modification in front of me. Real work. Real accountability. At 4:02 p.m., another call came through. 58. I let it ring until it stopped. I left base with my phone still face down in my bag. 58 missed calls. That number didn't feel dramatic. It felt precise. 17 from Ashley, 14 from my dad, 9 from my mom, 6 from the broker's office, 4 from the title company, 3 from the lawyer. The rest scattered across unknown numbers I recognized from previous threads. 2 days earlier, I'd been told not to contact them again. Now the same people couldn't stop dialing. I drove home without turning the phone back on. Colorado traffic moved at its usual pace. Gas stations were still open. Restaurants were busy. Nothing in the outside world reflected whatever was happening inside my family's group chat. When I got to my apartment, I set the phone on the kitchen counter and turned its screen up. Another text from Ashley. Why are you doing this? Then, answer me. I opened the voicemail app instead. The first message was from the broker Marcus. Hi, Natalie. We're trying to understand what changed. The seller's attorney is asking for reconfirmation on the funding sequence. If you could clarify your role, that would help. Clarify your role. The second message was my dad. They're saying the bridge timeline isn't supported without your review. Just call them and straighten it out. Straighten it out. The third was Ashley. Her voice didn't sound angry anymore. It sounded strained. You didn't have to pull everything. We just needed space. That doesn't mean you burn it down. I hadn't burned anything down. I had removed my name. There's a difference. The next voicemail was from the title coordinator. We've updated the file to reflect your withdrawal. However, certain prior references to your oversight created an expectation of continued involvement. We need direct confirmation from the borrowers before proceeding. Expectation. That word carried weight. Expectations are invisible until they're removed. I listened to all of them once, then set the phone down again. I wasn't avoiding reality. I was letting it settle. On Friday morning, the first formal shift happened. The lender issued a conditional pause. Not a denial. A pause pending revised documentation. The seller, hearing that the buyer's side was recalibrating, began reviewing backup offers. That's standard in a competitive market. No one waits indefinitely for stability. At 10:26 a.m., my dad texted, "They're opening the house to another buyer." That part made sense. Sellers don't gamble on fragile funding structures. At 11:03 a.m., Ashley called again. This time I answered. "What do you want?" she asked immediately. "You told me not to contact you. That was emotional. This is real. It was real when you sent it. You know what I meant." "No, I know what you wrote." She let out a sharp breath. "The lender is nervous because you stepped out. The lender is nervous because the structure changed, because you changed it." "No," I said evenly, "because I stopped reinforcing it." There was a pause long enough for me to hear her swallow. "You're enjoying this." That accusation surprised me. "This isn't enjoyable." "Then why won't you fix it?" Because that was the pattern. Create urgency. Apply pressure. Wait for Natalie to step in. "I'm not part of it," I said. "You've always been part of it. That was before you told me not to be." Silence again. "Grandma's application is under review now," she added, lowering her voice. "Silver Ridge wants updated financial assurance. They're asking questions. Silver Ridge had a right to ask questions. Assisted living facilities don't operate on hope." "Then answer them," I said. "You know the numbers. They're your numbers. You could just confirm we're stable. Are you?" She didn't answer that. Instead, she shifted. "You're punishing us." Punishment implies intent. "I'm aligning with your boundary." What does that even mean? It means you asked me not to be involved. That doesn't mean you sabotage everything. I didn't sabotage anything. Her voice tightened. You knew what would happen. I knew what could happen. There's a difference. The townhouse deal didn't collapse that afternoon. It wobbled. The seller's agent scheduled a secondary showing. The contractor postponed renovation work pending deposit confirmation. The lender moved the file to a pending clarification status. Nothing exploded. It just slowed. At 2:18 p.m., the lawyer called again. "We're evaluating potential exposure related to prior representations," he said carefully. Exposure to what I asked. To reliance. Reliance. That word matters legally. If third parties relied on the assumption of your oversight and that assumption is no longer valid, we need to document the shift. I already documented it. Yes, we have your emails. Then what's the issue? The issue is timing. Some of the conversations referencing your involvement occurred after your withdrawal. That stopped me. Be specific. There were verbal assurances given that you were looped in. I wasn't. I understand that. But they told people I was. A brief pause. Yes, not forged documents, not fake signatures, just implied involvement. That's enough to create problems. I need copies of any written references, I said. We'll provide what we can. The call ended. For the first time since Thursday night, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, focus. If my name had been casually leveraged to stabilize conversations I wasn't part of, that wasn't just messy. That brushed up against my professional world. At 4:47 p.m., the seller formally accepted a backup offer. The townhouse was no longer theirs. Ashley's text came 5 minutes later. It's gone. I read it once. Then another message followed. You did this. The house wasn't gone because I withdrew. It was gone because the structure couldn't withstand scrutiny without reinforcement. But from her perspective, the timing was simple. I stepped out. The deal collapsed. At 6:12 p.m., my dad called again. They're saying we may have to reduce the listing price on our house, he said quietly. The contractor won't move forward without confirmed funds. Then adjust. You're really not going to help. He didn't ask it as the question. He stated it as realization. I looked at the call count again. Still 58. No new ones. Just the same numbers sitting there like a timestamp. 2 days ago, I was excluded. 48 hours later, they were recalculating everything. And for the first time in years, I wasn't part of the recalculation. I didn't sleep much that night, not because of guilt, but because of what the lawyer had said. Reliance, verbal assurances, references to my oversight after I had withdrawn. That wasn't just family tension anymore. That was documentation territory. By 600 the next morning, I was at PT running laps, while my brain sorted through policy instead of pacing. In the Army, when something even remotely touches your name in a financial context, especially if third parties are involved, you don't ignore it. You don't wait to see if it blows over. You self-report, not because you're guilty, because you protect your clearance before someone else questions it. By 7:35, I was at my desk drafting a short memo for my chain of command. Clear, factual, no drama. Over the past 48 hours, my name has been referenced in private real estate transactions after I formally withdrew from involvement. I have documentation of withdrawal and communication records. I am notifying command to ensure transparency and prevent any perceived conflict. That was it. No emotional language, no family backstory, just risk management. I walked it down the hall to my company commander's office. He read it carefully. This personal, he asked. Yes, sir. Any financial liability on your end? No, sir. Any signed documents? No, sir. He nodded once. Good call, bringing it up. Keep everything documented. I am. That conversation took less than 5 minutes. No interrogation, no raised eyebrows, just professionalism. That's how it works when you handle things early. On the drive back to my office, my phone buzzed again. Ashley. I let it go to voicemail. Then a text. Why did you talk to a lawyer? I hadn't. The lawyer had talked to me. I typed back. I documented my withdrawal. That's not what I asked. Then ask better. She called immediately. I answered. You reported this, didn't you? Yes. To who? My chain of command. There was silence on the other end. You made this official? She asked, voice tight. It became official when my name was used after I withdrew. We weren't using you. The lawyer said otherwise. Another pause. It wasn't like that. What was it like? We just told them you had looked things over. After I told you I wasn't involved, it wasn't a big deal. It is to me. She exhaled sharply. You're overreacting. In my world, overreacting gets people in trouble. Underreacting does. Did you tell the lender I was still advising? I asked. She hesitated. We said you were familiar with the structure. Present tense. Silence. That was answer enough. Do you understand how that looks? I asked. It looks like we trust you. It looks like I'm responsible. You're not responsible. Then don't imply that I am. Her voice shifted from defensive to frustrated. You're making this bigger than it is. No, I'm making it clear. She lowered her tone. You think this is about contracts. It's not. It's about loyalty. That word again. Loyalty. In the military, loyalty doesn't mean covering for someone when they cut corners. It means telling the truth early enough to prevent damage. Loyalty doesn't override documentation, I said. You sound like a robot, and you sound like this is still social. She went quiet for a few seconds. The board from Silver Ridge called Mom, she said finally. They're asking if the funding plan changed. It did, because you stepped out. Because it depended on me being in. There was a difference she refused to acknowledge. At 11:14 a.m., my dad texted. The listing agent is suggesting we lower expectations on price. That translated to the house might not sell at the number they were counting on. At 12:02 p.m., the lawyer emailed me. Attached are transcripts of communications where your involvement was referenced post-withdrawal. I opened the attachment. In one email Ashley had written, my sister has reviewed the funding timeline and we're comfortable proceeding. Time-stamped the day after she sent the "Don't contact us again" text. Comfortable proceeding. I leaned back in my chair and read it twice. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't miscommunication. That was leverage. Not malicious, not criminal, just careless. And carelessness around my name isn't something I ignore. I forwarded the email to my commander with a short note, for situational awareness only. No action required. Then I saved everything to a secure folder. No dramatic music, no pounding heart, just documentation. At 2:30 p.m., Ashley called again. This is spiraling, she said immediately. It's recalibrating. The lender is asking if we misrepresented stability. Did you? No? Then answer them. They're asking if you were part of it. I'm not. She sounded tired now. This wasn't supposed to turn into this. It never is. Most collapses start with confidence. At 4:08 p.m., my mom texted, Silver Ridge wants updated financial statements before confirming Grandma's move-in date. That was the first message that made me feel something close to tension. Grandma had already told her church friends she was moving. Not because she cared about marble floors, because she thought it made things easier for everyone. Ashley followed up 5 minutes later. Are you happy now? Happiness had nothing to do with it. This isn't about me, I typed. It feels like it. It feels like consequences. She didn't reply. By the time I shut down my computer at the end of the day, nothing had exploded. No lawsuits, no accusations, just emails. Clarifications. Pauses. But one thing had shifted permanently. My name was no longer casually floating inside their plans. It was either documented, or it wasn't there at all. I saw the event flyer on Facebook before anyone sent it to me. Ashley had shared it publicly. Community fundraiser for senior care access, hosted by the Reynolds family. The photo was clean and polished. My mom in a navy blazer, Ashley beside her smiling. A caption about navigating unexpected family challenges while honoring our commitment to elder care. Unexpected family challenges. That was one way to phrase it. The event was scheduled for Saturday evening at a local country club just outside Colorado Springs. Tickets were already sold out. Sponsors listed. A short program planned where Ashley would share a personal update about resilience. Resilience. I didn't comment. I didn't react. I screenshotted it and saved it. By noon, 3 people had texted me the same question. Is this about you? I didn't answer. At 2:15 p.m., Ashley called. You've seen it, haven't you? Yes. It's not what you think. I don't think anything. I read it. It's just a fundraiser. With a personal update. She paused. We needed to address rumors. What rumors? That we can't manage our own affairs. I leaned back in my chair. And how are you addressing that? We're explaining that you overstepped. There it was. Not unstable financing. Not paused transactions. Me. You told people I overstepped. We said you made unilateral decisions that impacted the transition. I withdrew. You did more than that. No, her voice sharpened. You knew what would happen. And you knew what you were implying. She exhaled hard. You're twisting this. I'm clarifying it. The silence that followed felt heavier than our earlier arguments. This event is important, she said finally. Mom's reputation is already shaky with the foundation board. We need to show stability. Then show stability. We are. Without using my name. She didn't respond to that. The call ended without resolution. By 4:40 p.m., I had received 2 emails from people who planned to attend the fundraiser. Both were polite. Both asked some version of the same question. Is there anything we should understand before Saturday? That told me something important. The story was already circulating. In communities like ours, word travels fast, especially when financial plans wobble publicly. I opened my laptop and began organizing a clean timeline again. Not because I plan to send it anywhere yet, because clarity matters when narratives shift. Thursday, 8:14 p.m. Ashley texted, "Don't contact us again." Friday, 7:43 a.m. I withdrew from all involvement in writing. Saturday, lender paused file pending clarification. Monday, seller accepted backup offer. Tuesday, Silver Ridge requested updated financial assurance. Every event lined up logically. No drama, just sequence. At 6:03 p.m., my dad called. "We're asking you not to show up Saturday," he said. "I wasn't invited." "That's not the point." "What is?" "It would escalate things." "They're already escalated." He lowered his voice. "Your mother is under pressure. She put herself under pressure. She feels blindsided. She told me not to contact you." That wasn't literal. It was written. He didn't argue that. "You're turning this into a power struggle," he said. "No, I stepped out. You knew the system depended on you. It shouldn't have." Silence again. Then he said something that surprised me. "Do you want us to fail?" I considered the question carefully. "No." "Then why won't you help stabilize this event?" "Because stability built on implication isn't stability." He sighed. "You always talk like a briefing." "That's because briefings avoid confusion." Saturday morning arrived cold and clear. I didn't plan to attend the fundraiser, but I didn't plan to stay silent either. At 10:12 a.m., I sent a short factual email to the two individuals who had reached out earlier. "I'm aware of the upcoming event. For clarity, I formally withdrew from all family financial transactions prior to any funding pauses or property decisions. Documentation available upon request." That was it. No emotion, no accusation, just clarity. By 11:30 a.m., one of them replied, "Appreciate the transparency." That phrase told me everything. Transparency changes tone. At 3:45 p.m., Ashley texted again. "Did you email people?" "Yes." "You're undermining us." I corrected misinformation. "We never named you. You implied me." "That's not the same. It is when my clearance is involved." She didn't answer that part. The fundraiser began at 6 p.m. I didn't attend, but I heard about it almost immediately. At 6:48 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from someone inside the event. "They're saying you pulled support without warning." I typed back. I withdrew in writing. At 7:12 p.m., another message. "People are asking questions about the townhouse." Of course they were. When financial transitions become public narratives, details follow. At 7:39 p.m., Ashley called. I answered. "Why are people asking about the lender?" she demanded. "Because lenders are part of real estate. You made them suspicious." No documentation did. "They're saying the timeline doesn't match what we described." That's because it doesn't. Her breathing was uneven now. This was supposed to reassure people. Then reassure them with facts. "You're impossible." "No," I said evenly. "I'm consistent." She didn't hang up immediately. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said something quieter. "Do you know how hard it is to stand up there and feel like everyone's evaluating you?" "Yes." "I deal with that professionally. Every briefing, every audit, every inspection. You learn something important in those rooms. If your structure is solid, questions don't scare you. If it isn't, questions feel like attacks." The call ended. By 9:04 p.m., I received one final text from my dad. It didn't go the way we planned. That wasn't dramatic. It was accurate. And for the first time since Thursday night, I realized something simple. The narrative wasn't collapsing because I stepped out. It was collapsing because it couldn't survive scrutiny without me inside it. I was reviewing inventory projections Monday morning when my battalion XO stepped into my office. "Got a minute, Captain Brooks?" "Yes, sir." He closed the door behind him, not urgently, just professionally. I received a courtesy call from a civilian board member in Colorado Springs. Nothing formal, just awareness. That told me everything I needed to know. "What kind of awareness?" I asked. "Apparently your name came up during a public fundraiser tied to financial misrepresentation concerns. He wanted to ensure there wasn't a conflict that would impact your role here." "I self-reported on Friday, sir." "I saw that. That's why this is a non-issue." Non-issue. That word meant I had handled it correctly. "You're good," he added. "But keep your documentation tight." "It already is." He nodded once and left. That conversation lasted less than 3 minutes, but it confirmed something important. The narrative had officially traveled beyond family, which meant facts mattered more than feelings. At 10:22 a.m., Ashley called. I answered. "You told the Army?" she asked immediately. "I notified my command of potential name exposure." "You made it sound criminal." "I made it sound transparent." "You escalated this." "No, I contained it." She let out a frustrated breath. "Mom is saying you're trying to destroy her reputation." "Her reputation is tied to her statements." She was trying to protect the family, By implying I was still managing finances, you're twisting everything. I'm aligning it. She went quiet for a moment. People are asking why the house is still listed. Because it hasn't sold. That's not helpful. It's factual. Do you have to be like this? Yes. There was no sarcasm in my tone. Just consistency. At 12:05 p.m., my dad sent a long email. Not angry. Not defensive. Measured. He outlined the current situation. The house had been relisted at a lower price after buyers requested additional disclosures. The emergency credit line had been partially frozen pending repayment. Silver Ridge had delayed my grandmother's move-in pending clarity of long-term funding stability. He ended the email with a sentence that felt heavier than the rest. We didn't realize how much of this depended on you. That was the first honest thing anyone had written, I replied simply. It shouldn't have. At 2:30 p.m., the lawyer emailed again. The lender is conducting a final review of representations made prior to the funding pause. Based on your withdrawal documentation, there appears to be no personal liability on your part. Appears to be. In legal language, that's about as reassuring as it gets. I saved the email. Then I forwarded it to my commander with a short note. For record continuity, no further action required. By late afternoon, my phone had quieted. No rapid-fire texts. No accusatory voicemails. Just one message from Ashley at 4:48 p.m. Mom thinks you should apologize publicly. I read it twice before responding. For what? For pulling support in a way that embarrassed her. I stared at the word embarrassed. It kept resurfacing. Not misrepresented. Not inaccurate. Embarrassed. I withdrew privately, I typed. Public consequences followed. She feels humiliated. She built the stage. The typing bubble appeared and disappeared 3 times before she finally responded. You've always liked being right. That accusation felt almost nostalgic. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I thought about something my 1st Brigade commander once told me after a logistics review went sideways. Being right isn't the goal. Being documented is. Right can be debated. Documentation can't, I typed back. This isn't about being right. Then what is it about? Not being attached to instability. She didn't respond. That evening, my dad called again. His voice sounded tired, not angry. The board from the fundraiser wants a written clarification. About what? About the timeline. Then provided. They're asking for confirmation from you. Confirmation of what? That you withdrew before any funding misrepresentation. I already confirmed that in writing to the lender and facility. They want something separate. Send them the same documentation. He paused. You won't soften it. There's nothing to soften. You could phrase it differently. Facts don't have tone. Silence filled the line. Then he asked something quieter. Do you still consider us family? The question wasn't manipulative. It sounded exhausted. Yes. Then why does this feel like a standoff? Because you expected me to absorb the impact. And now you're absorbing it. He didn't argue that. After we hung up, I sat on my couch and looked at the ceiling. No dramatic music. No racing thoughts. Just a calm understanding. For years, I had been the invisible buffer. When paperwork got complicated, I handled it. When financial language confused them, I translated it. When timelines didn't align, I realigned them. And because I did it quietly, they assumed it required no cost. But stability always costs someone something. In this case, it had cost me professional risk. That part had ended. The clearance concern was neutralized. My name was cleanly separated. The house would sell eventually. The credit line would be repaid. Silver Ridge would either approve or decline based on actual numbers. The system was no longer leaning on me. At 9:17 p.m., one final text arrived from Ashley. It feels like you won. I read it carefully. Then I responded with the only accurate answer. This wasn't a competition. There was no immediate reply. And for the first time since Thursday night, my phone stayed quiet long enough for the silence to feel normal instead of charged. Not empty, just balanced. The quiet lasted 3 days. Not the dramatic kind of silence. Just fewer calls. Fewer emotional texts. Fewer attempts to reframe what had already been documented. By Thursday afternoon, the house officially went under contract again. Lower price, heavier inspection clause, real buyers this time, clean financing on their side. No assumptions. My dad emailed the update like a status report. Offer accepted. Closing in 30 days pending repairs. No blame, no commentary, just numbers. Ashley didn't text that day. Instead, my mom called. I let it ring twice before answering. I spoke to Silver Ridge, she said immediately. No greeting. Okay. They're requesting 6 months of verified liquidity before approving your grandmother's placement. That's standard. It wasn't standard before. It always was. She went quiet for a moment. We assumed the bridge would clear first. That was the assumption. And now they're asking for proof. Her tone shifted. You've made everything harder. I've made everything documented. You know what I mean. I do. She didn't say anything for several seconds. When she spoke again, her voice sounded different. Not polished. Not public-facing. We didn't think it would unravel this fast. Unravel. That was the first time she'd used a word that reflected reality instead of image. Because it wasn't built to hold scrutiny, I said. You make it sound like we were reckless. You were optimistic. That landed softer than reckless, but it was still true. She exhaled slowly. Silver Ridge suggested a less expensive facility. That's practical. That's embarrassing. There it was again. Embarrassment isn't financial instability, I replied. It's perception. You don't understand how this looks. I understand exactly how it looks. Silence. Then she asked the question she'd been circling for weeks. Are you going to help with your grandmother or not? I am. She hesitated. How? Directly. Not through your transaction. Another pause. You've already arranged something, haven't you? Yes. The truth settled heavily on the line. I spoke with a social worker through our base network. There's a smaller assisted living facility 15 minutes from you. Clean record. Transparent pricing. They don't require speculative liquidity. You went around us. I went around instability. She didn't respond to that. She moves next week, I added. The deposit is covered. Month to month. No bridge required. Covered by who? Me. The silence that followed was longer than any we'd had so far. You think you're better than us, she said finally. No. You act like you're above this. I'm outside it. That distinction mattered. I wasn't fixing their system. I was ensuring one person didn't pay the price for it. My grandmother moved the following Tuesday. No marble lobby. No grand staircase. Just a clean facility with licensed nurses, structured schedules, and a courtyard with actual sunlight. She liked the courtyard. Feels normal, she said when I visited that weekend. Not impressive. Normal. Ashley showed up 20 minutes into my visit. We hadn't seen each other in person since the fundraiser. She looked tired. Not defeated. Just recalibrated. So this is it, she said, glancing around the room. It works. It's not Silver Ridge. No. She crossed her arms loosely. Mom is still upset. She'll adjust. She thinks you did this to prove a point. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I adjusted the paperwork folder on the small desk by the window. This wasn't about a point. Then what was it about? Boundaries. She studied me for a moment. You could have just told us to stop using your name. I did. That text was clear. She let out a small, humorless laugh. You really weren't bluffing. No. She leaned against the wall. The house closes in 3 weeks. I know. We had to liquidate some things. I assumed. She nodded slowly. The board hasn't asked Mom back. That's their choice. She says you could have defended her. I defended the timeline. That's not the same. It is where I work. She didn't argue that. Instead, she said something softer. I didn't realize how much we leaned on you. I met her eyes. That's the problem. We stood there in quiet for a few seconds, while my grandmother flipped through a magazine by the window. No yelling. No accusations. Just reality settling. Later that night, I received a final email from the lender. The Reynolds file has been closed without further inquiry. No additional clarification required. Clean. Complete. No liability. The system had absorbed its own weight. 30 days later, the house sold. Not at the number they once boasted about, but it sold. The emergency credit line was repaid over time. The fundraiser quietly disappeared from social feeds. Life didn't implode. It adjusted. One evening about 6 weeks after the original text, my dad called. Things are simpler now, he said. That's good. We're not moving to the lake. I know. We'll stay local. That makes sense. He paused. I was wrong to assume you'd always step in. Yes. He didn't argue. I don't expect you to fix things anymore, he added. Good. A faint exhale on the other end. We'll manage. I know. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony overlooking the mountains and thought about the last month. 58 missed calls. Funding pauses. Board questions. Public narratives. None of it had required revenge. It had required absence. That was the part no one had anticipated. They expected confrontation. They expected emotion. They expected me to argue. Instead, I stepped back, and when the structure leaned without me holding it up, it revealed exactly how stable it actually was. Ashley texted once more that night. Guess we're on our own now. I read it carefully. Then I replied with the only sentence that felt honest. I didn't break anything. I just stopped holding it together. I used to think being the reliable one was a compliment. The responsible daughter. The steady officer. The person who could translate contracts, fix timelines, calm lenders, and make messy decisions look smooth. But responsibility without boundaries isn't loyalty. It's silent exhaustion. What changed wasn't my love for my family. It was my willingness to let my name be used as a safety net. When I stepped back, nothing exploded. No one went bankrupt. No one ended up on the street. The world didn't end. It just became honest. And honesty feels harsh at first when you're used to being rescued. Family revenge stories don't always look like shouting matches or dramatic showdowns. Sometimes revenge is quiet. Sometimes it's documentation. Sometimes it's simply refusing to carry weight that was never yours. In family drama like this, the real power shift happens when the dependable one stops volunteering. If this story felt familiar, if you've ever been the person holding everything together while everyone else took credit, you're not alone. And you're not wrong for choosing boundaries. If you want more family revenge stories grounded in real life, real consequences, and strong women who know their worth, make sure you subscribe to the channel. These aren't fantasies. They're lessons about power, accountability, and what happens when the fixer finally steps back.